Welcome back all. So today I am going to go ahead and open up the talk about Angular directives, but we're going to primarily talk about ngIf and ngFor as they are Angular directives. And we will in all likelihood be using them later on as well. But for now, you need these two. ngIf, in our case, here will mean that if condition has been met, it will display the element, otherwise the element will not even exist. So I'm referring to this line here. So if this is false, this line will not exist. If this is true, this line will exist. So not only being displayed or not being displayed, but it exists or does not exist depending on the condition here, the status of the condition here. Anyway, this is very similar to the hidden element, but it is different in a sense that with hidden, you remember when we used hidden here in the previous tutorials, this paragraph is either displayed or not displayed with hidden. But with ngIf, it exists or it does not exist. So if it doesn't exist, obviously it cannot be displayed as well. That is the difference between them. However, whether we use hidden or ngIf, in our case, it really doesn't make any difference in terms of the user viewing the actual page or the content being displayed there. So another thing that we need to know about, another directive that we need to be familiar with is the ngFor. And ngFor, in essence, is a loop or a way of looping through something or repeating the code. I will demonstrate it down below very soon. So we have my first Angular 2 app, this we know, and this part has been explained extensively. And then we come to this part. So it says here false, right? So let's change it to true. Oops. To true. And save it. So now this paragraph is to be shown. So there's nothing really new in this paragraph. I mean, you have these EM tags, which means that the letters will be tilted to the right, but that's about it. We've already talked about all the segments of this element of paragraph. But anyway, the ngIf here, if it is true, the element will exist and therefore it will be displayed. Okay, so yep, it's definitely there. Your email is test@test.com. So your email is and then current user.email. Excellent. But if you go back to the site and if you press F12, and I have zoomed this in as much as I could, probably a little bit more. Hopefully you can see everything now. If you go into body and then my app and then scroll down and go into the first div and then scroll down, you will see that there is a paragraph here. You open up the paragraph and you see indeed that the paragraph itself does exist. It says your email is and then test@test.com. Okay, so it exists. But if we close this and go back to the atom and change this to false, and if you save it, and then go back to the site and wait for it to load, you will see that the email is not written out at all. So it doesn't, it's not there. It's supposed to say your email is, etc. If I press F12 again, if I open up the body, and if I open up my app, and if I go into the first div as before, you will see the paragraph which we're looking for doesn't actually exist at all. It's not here. It's non-existent. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you with ngFor. Now, for the time being, I want you to disregard the asterisks, as that falls into a rather advanced subject that will be processed later on during the course. But as I said, for now, all you need to know is that it needs to be placed in front of ngIf and ngFor. So this is the syntax. ngIf and ngFor with asterisks in front. I will explain later on when we get to the complex things, to the advanced things, but for the time being, there just is no point of whatsoever for me to explain it, as it would only serve the purpose of confusing a lot of people out there. And you can use this exact same syntax and just change false to true or true to false. and you can use it pretty much anywhere in pretty much any element to display that element or not to display it, for that element to exist or not for that element not to exist. We will make this dynamic in a moment. So we are going to go back to our app component.ts, and everything is the same. So we'll get to this part as well. But for the time being, I just want you to take a look at the hide email boolean that we have, and we're going to utilize it in order to make this more flexible and more dynamic. So I'm just going to go ahead and do exclamation mark hide email. Okay? So you can play around with variables or properties as they are called in Angular 2. So hide email here, and I'm going to go ahead and negate hide email. So what does it mean to negate it? Well, if it's false, when negated, it will become true. So when this is evaluated, this will actually be true. Therefore, this paragraph will exist. Why are we using this boolean here? So that the button would actually work, because for the time being, it doesn't actually work. It doesn't do anything. You see, when I toggle click, nothing happens. It is not displayed. But when I put this in here, I didn't save it yet. And down below, I say on click, call method toggle, and method toggle basically uses the boolean and then negates the boolean and changes false to true and true to false. So depending on the click. So if you click it, it's going to change it, and depending on the initial status. So if I save this now and wait for it to load. You see, when I click, it disappears. When I click, it reappears. Hops, 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 hops. It pops in and out of existence, so to say. Okay, now we can move on down below. The UL, we have a list of users that we wish to display. So we will use the UL element, as that is an HTML element for unordered list. So UL unordered list. And then we have the LI, which is again an HTML element, and it stands for list elements. It basically is for list elements. It's LI, but it's list elements. Anyway, we would like to add for every user one list item. So ng will do this for us. So what do we mean by adding a list item for every user? Well, this is a list. I mean, this is an HTML element for list elements, and we would like this to happen what we have on our page. So you have like a list item for 1 and a list item for 2 and 3 and 4, and you have certain things that are printed out for every one of these. Okay? So for that, we need to use ngFor. And in order for us to use the ngFor, we need some sort of a array. So we've created an array here in the app component.ts, and this is a property of type array whose elements are of type user. So once again, this is a property called users. That's an arbitrary name of type array whose elements are of type user, and interface user exists down below, which we have created way back. So the elements of this array basically have username. These are types. So you have username here, and user1 is of type username, user2 is of type username, and so on. Again, email, user1@example.com is of type email, and so on for the rest of them. So we would like to display all of them onto the screen. Now, we could, of course, access each one of these manually, but that's like, imagine if you had 200 elements. Are you seriously going to access every one of them manually? That would be insane, for the lack of a better word. That's why we use a loop to go through each element, and for the loop to do the painstakingly hard process for us, so to say. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and split down and go back to the array. Let me just resize it a little bit so that it's a little bit clearer, so that we can correlate between the two. Okay, so this loop here, so *ngFor. Now, hash user, that's an arbitrary name. We could have typed in whatever we wanted there. We could have typed in tralala blah 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 whatever. We could have just smashed the keyboard. And then off, this is part of the syntax, so this is mandatory. This is as it is. So off, and then users, which is referring to this array, to the property of type array, so users. And this is something we're going to come to in a moment. So what we are doing here in essence is basically ngFor will loop through every user, so through every user here in a property of users of type array, and it will make an li element for each iteration. So for each user, it will actually create an li element. What is going on? So users is being pooled, the values from it are being pooled, and they're being placed into user. And then the user, and then by using what's been put into user, li elements will be created for each one of them. Now, index that we have placed here, so index is a keyword. You can type in whatever you want, and you place a hash, and then a name of your iterator, and then equal, and then here you need an index keyword. And then down below, we will keep track of our iterations so that we know that this was the first, that this was the second, this was the third, that this was the fourth, etc. Then you have user.username, so you're pulling the username from the up above. So user.username, sorry, not from up above. You're pulling it from right here, my bad. So basically type in user and then dot and then username, okay? So whatever is the current iteration, wherever it is, it's going to pull like user1. So, and then we have this minus sign. We're not really doing anything with it. We're just displaying a dash on the screen and then the tilted letters of the user.email. Okay, so I know that's a little bit confusing, and let's go through it one more time, just to make sure that you understand this, because this is quite important. And I know the first time I've learned about this, it took me like 3 or 4 explanations to actually figure it out. I know that you can rewind the video, but I like to make things easy for you. Anyway, you have this user, which is an arbitrary name, a reference, and it says off, and then you have the name of the array, so users. So users here. And it will take this entire line and place users, will take this entire line, and then we'll place it into user. And then when you print it out onto the screen, it will say user.username. So user.username, which is referring to this username, which is the first iteration. So what is the value of it? It's user1. And then you have user.email. Oh, the value of email is user1@example.com. And then it will create an li element for each one of these, and it will display it on the screen, simple as that. Now, rewind it if you didn't understand it, and if you still need help, well, we find your questions to be welcoming in the Q&A section, so please feel free to post as many as you like. And we will do our best to actually explain it. Now let's go ahead and inspect this page once again. So just press F12 if you're Firefox on Windows. And go into the body, go into my app, and go into UL. And as you can see, like, oops, there you go. There you go. So for each one of these, so for each one of these, you had an li element that was created. So you see user, it says here 4, okay, 4. Li element first, of course, but you can't see it on the screen. And then it says user4 dash, and then have user4@example.com. And it's an li element. And this process has been repeated for each one of these. Now imagine if you had like 300-400 elements, you would really want to loop through them. You really wouldn't want to create an li element for each single individual element. I mean, that would be, for each individual like value or each individual line, that would be horrible. I mean, your code would look enormous. That is why we use loops here. Well, sort of. So it's ngFor, which is basically, in essence, a loop. Take that with a grain of salt. Okay, so bid you farewell and hope to see you in the follow-up tutorial where we will actually begin the construction of our application. So from the next one, in all likelihood, we will begin constructing a real-world application that you begin building from scratch. You will see nothing. And then over a certain period of time, as you watch these courses and as you do what I do, you will see your application come alive. Bid your farewell.